There is an entire world beneath the surface of our oceans that almost nobody has ever seen. In fact, scientists have explored less than 5% of it. We actually know more about the surface of the moon than we do about the deep sea. And right now, thousands of feet below you, there are animals alive that look so strange, most people wouldn't believe they're real. And in this video, we're going to explore the 8 most bizarre ocean creatures ever discovered. And the deeper we go, the stranger life gets. Let's dive in and start where it all begins, the epipelagic or sunlight zone. This is the top layer of the ocean, the part we're all familiar with, where sunlight allows phytoplankton to grow, forming the base of the entire marine food chain and supporting everything from fish to sharks and dolphins. But even in this safe zone, once you get closer to reefs and rocky coastlines, things get weird fast. Because hiding in those burrows is one of the most unhinged fish in North America, the sarcastic fringehead. Now, first off, this fish maxes out at around 12 inches long. And just from its external appearance, it's quite ordinary, and you probably wouldn't even notice it. However, if another fringehead comes near their hull, that's when things get wild. The male opens his mouth, and I mean fully opens it, and the jaws swing outward sideways and the mouth expands to nearly 4 times its resting size. And inside its open mouth, you'll see a mixture of yellow, green, and blue colors looking exactly like something out of a sci-fi movie. 2 fighting males will literally press open mouths against each other in this bizarre standoff. And while it may look like they're just kissing, they're actually sizing each other up, and the male with the biggest mouth gape wins, and he usually dominates the territory. But the loser has to abandon his hull and go find another one. These fish live from San Francisco all the way down to central Baja California, and usually at depths from the surface to about 240 feet deep. But this is still shallow water. Even in the most light-filled, productive, crowded part of the ocean, you've got a fish whose skull mechanics are so specialized that paleontologists even compare them to extinct prehistoric fish. And if things are already this strange in full sunlight, what happens when the light starts to slowly disappear? At about 650 feet, the sunlight zone ends and the blue gets darker and the normal colors of the color spectrum start to disappear. And as we drop past the thermocline, which is the transition layer separating the warm, well-mixed epipelagic zone, we enter the cooler, stable, and dim waters of the mesopelagic, the twilight zone. And this is where the ocean really starts getting weird. This zone stretches from about 650 to 3,300 feet deep and covers nearly 60% of the planet. But with only 1% of sunlight reaching it, photosynthesis stops and life depends on marine snow, drifting down from above, while cold temperatures, low oxygen, and nightly mass migrations shape one of the most active yet hidden ecosystems on Earth. And if you were floating here in the dim waters around 2,000 feet down, something might be hovering just above you, perfectly still and looking straight up. One of the strangest fish ever documented, the barrel eye. On first glance, this fish doesn't even look real. It only grows to about 6 inches long. That may not be intimidating at first, but the head is what captures your attention. It has a completely transparent, fluid-filled dome over its skull. You can literally see straight through the top of its head, and inside that dome are its 2 bright green tubular eyes that look like they're staring straight upward through the ceiling of its skull. And the funny thing is that for years, scientists thought those eyes were fixed in place and that they could only look straight up, scanning for silhouettes against the faint light filtering down from the above. But in 2008, researchers watching live ROV footage discovered something insane. The eyes rotate. They found that the barrel eye's eyes swivel forward like binoculars when the fish tilts its body upright to feed. For most of the time, the barrel eye hangs there horizontally, with its fins barely moving and eyes pointed straight up. They typically scan above for the shadow of jellyfish, siphonophores, small drifting animals outlined against what little light remains. And when it spots something, it rotates its eyes forward, tilts its body vertically, and moves in to steal food right off the tentacles of those jellyfish-like organisms. And that transparent dome is said to protect the barrel eye's eyes from the very stinging tentacles that it raids for trapped prey. And here's what makes it even more interesting. Most of what we thought we knew about this fish came from damaged specimens that were brought up in nets or even in the stomach contents of some of its predators, like lancetfish. But that clear dome collapses when pressure changes. So for decades, drawings didn't even show it properly, and it wasn't until researchers filmed it alive off of California in the early 2000s that we actually saw what it really looks like. And it lives right here in this twilight layer, usually between about 2,000 and 2,600 feet down in the North Pacific. In a place where light barely exists, this fish evolved a see-through skull and rotating eyes just to maximize the tiniest scraps of visibility available at that depth. And that's what makes the mesopelagic so fascinating. Vision here isn't just adapted, it's specialized for darkness, which brings us to something that doesn't just see in the dark, but creates its own light, the vampire squid. Now, the name alone makes this animal sound dramatic, but it's not actually a squid, and of course, it's definitely not a vampire. Its scientific name, Vampiroteuthes infernalis, literally translates to vampire squid from hell. But actually, that has more to do with its appearance than its behavior. It grows to about a foot long and can range in color from dark red to almost black. Like its cephalopod cousins, it has 8 webbed arms connected by a cloak of skin with 2 long retractable filaments hidden between them. But one of the most bizarre things about the specimen is its massive eyes, and proportionally, it has some of the largest eyes in the animal kingdom. On a 6-inch individual, the eyes can be up to nearly an inch wide. Since the species lives between about 2,000 and 3,000 feet deep, it needs these eyes to feed on its prey. And to make things worse, down there, oxygen saturation can drop to levels as low as 3%. And for most complex animals, that would be suffocating. But the vampire squid has one of the lowest metabolic rates of any cephalopod. Its blue blood binds oxygen extremely efficiently, and its body is gelatinous, almost neutrally buoyant. And the benefit that this species has is that it barely has to move, since it only feeds on the marine snow we talked about earlier. But its namesake comes from the fact that when it feels threatened, it can flip itself inside out, pulling its arms up over its body in what researchers call the pumpkin posture. The underside of its quote-unquote cloak is dark and covered in spines. And to make things even more strange, it can release a cloud of bioluminescent mucus. And mind you, this isn't ink like its other cephalopod cousins. This glowing mucus is essentially just like hundreds of blue light particles drifting in the water that can stick to predators and flash for several minutes. And in a place where even a flash of bioluminescence stands out like a flare, that's enough time to disappear. The vampire squid is the only living member of its entire evolutionary order, a relic lineage that's said to have split from other cephalopods millions of years ago. Vampire squids aren't fast or really aggressive, but it's able to tolerate low oxygen and thrive in this deep sea environment. And that right there tells you something about this zone and the animals that live here. But as dim as it is here, there's still some light. However, once we drop past 3,300 feet, even that disappears, and we enter the bathypelagic, the midnight zone. Guys, speaking of cool deep sea stuff, check out my deep sea wear right here. So we have launched a line of really cool outdoor gear that I think has really clean, attractive designs, like this with the Thresher Shark, which is very on brand for today's video. This is not YouTuber merch. This is high quality, breathable, sun-resistant fabric to get you outdoors and keep you outdoors. I strongly recommend it. Some of them have hoods, some of them are short sleeve, some of them are long sleeve. If you're out on the ocean, I recommend the hooded long sleeve so you can stay out of the sun. Whatever you get, I think you're gonna like it. Buy the right team gear for your environment. They are limited edition and we are releasing new teams all the time. Pick yours up at the store below. Let's get back to the video. Below about 3,300 feet, you enter the midnight zone, where all light disappears and the ocean becomes a freezing, high-pressure world where nothing grows and everything survives by eating what falls from above. Well, or each other. It's still a pitch-black environment filled with strange predators like anglerfish and deep-sea sharks, including one of the first most likely you are to encounter, the bird-beaked dogfish. Now, at first glance, it's not a massive shark. It doesn't really have any big teeth. But the longer you look at it, the stranger it gets, and understandably so. It's got huge green eyes, which help it to see in the depths, and an extremely long, narrow snout, which we call a rostrum. That almost looks like a beak, which is exactly where it gets its namesake. Bird-beaked dogfish have an almost slender body with venomous spikes in front of its dorsal fin. It feeds on deep water bony fish, squid, octopus, shrimp, and pretty much whatever it can find in the deep sea. And like many deep-sea sharks, it gives birth to live young that develop inside the mother in egg cases before being born fully formed. And this species really became real to me for the first time in 2024 while we were filming our Alien Sharks show in Japan. We boarded a deep-sea long-lining vessel to study a variety of Japanese sharks. But what we found most shocking was the sheer number of bird-beaked dogfish coming up on those lines. Shark after shark being hauled up from thousands of feet down, and I even caught one on my electric fishing reel that I brought from the US. It completely changes your perception of the Midnight Zone when you realize just how many sharks are actually living there. And it wasn't just the bird-beaked dogfish, but Japanese velvet dogfish and others too. And then something happened that I simply will never forget. One of the females that was brought up was heavily pregnant, and the stress of capture caused her to give birth right there in the holding tank on deck. This was unbelievable. Never in my life did I think I would become a shark midwife, but the fact that we were able to join in on this otherwise shark fishing mission and actually save that shark that otherwise would have just been killed and added into the fish food trade was an amazing experience. And to see a shark actually give birth in my hands right then and there and to save the pups, that was something that I will literally never forget. Now you may be asking yourself, why were we out on this boat with these longliners? Well, these Japanese fishermen actually fish for all of these sharks to process their livers for oil. So unfortunately, all of these sharks would have ended up being killed, but we were there and saving and researching whatever we could. And standing there, holding one of those sharks, you realize that these animals are perfectly adapted to freezing, high-pressure darkness. But if you thought that the bird-beaked dogfish looks slightly unusual, the next shark down here looks truly prehistoric. The frilled shark. This animal is often called a living fossil, and when you see one, you can straight away understand why. It can grow up to about 6.5 feet long, and instead of the classic streamlined shark profile, it has this long, almost eel-like body with its fins pushed way back toward the tail. And get this, it only has one dorsal fin and 6 gills, unlike the 2 fins and 5 gills that regular sharks tend to have. And, not to mention, its giant glowing green eyes, and its 6 pairs of gill slits that form this fleshy frilled color, which gives it its name, the frilled shark. And then you look at the mouth, which is the freakiest thing about this shark. It has around 300 needle-like trident-shaped teeth arranged in rows that curve backwards like hooks, which are perfectly designed to snag deep-sea squid and soft-bodied prey in total darkness. And it's said that like a python, frilled sharks can open their jaws incredibly wide, allowing it to swallow prey that can be nearly half its own body size. And studies suggest it can actually curl its body and lunge forward almost like a snake striking. And in fact, my good buddy Dr. Dave Ebert actually got footage of this behavior when he was in Japan a while back. When you're standing inches away from one of these animals, literally holding it in your hand, it is an amazing looking creature. That's what makes the Midnight Zone so fascinating. In its own right, it's home to apex predators, sharks that have adapted over millions of years to pressure, cold, and total darkness. But even this layer, as extreme as it is, still sits above something deeper, because once we pass about 13,000 feet, the seafloor drops away even further, and that's when we enter the abyssopelagic zone, the abyss. The name itself actually comes from the Greek word abyssos, which literally means bottomless. And honestly, when you're talking about this part of the ocean, that name actually fits it pretty well. From about 13,000 to 20,000 feet, where temperatures hover just above freezing and pressure can exceed 11,000 pounds per square inch in total darkness. Despite covering most of the ocean floor, life here survives almost entirely on falling organic material, with rare events like whale falls creating entire ecosystems that can last for decades. And if you were scanning the seafloor in that darkness, you might spot something drifting by that looks almost cartoonish: the Dumbo octopus. And, if you've already guessed, its namesake comes from those 2 fins on top of its head that stick out like little ears, which honestly do make it look a lot like the Disney elephant it was named after. But in reality, these animals are some of the deepest living cephalopods on Earth. Members of the Dumbo octopus genus have been found living anywhere from about 3,300 feet down to well over 20,000 feet, meaning some of them actually cross over into the hadal trenches, deeper than the abyssal itself. And instead of using jet propulsion like you're probably familiar with other cephalopods, Dumbo octopus glide through the water by gently flapping those ears like fins on top of their head. And from an evolutionary point of view, it's a much more energy efficient way to move, which is absolutely critical in an environment where food is incredibly scarce. Like other animals down here, their bodies are soft, gelatinous, and almost balloon-like, and they often hover just above the sea floor while slowly scanning for prey such as small crustaceans, worms, and other tiny invertebrates that make up most of their diet. And instead of grabbing food with an aggressive attack like shallow water octopus might do, Dumbo octopus simply envelop their prey in the webbing between their arms and guide it towards their mouth. And something even crazier is that over millions of years of evolution, they simply lost the ability to produce ink, because in a place with absolutely no light, there's really no point to trying to create a screen to escape from predators. Instead, their survival strategy is simply to drift quietly through the darkness, conserving energy and avoiding attention as much as possible. And that right there tells you something important about the abyssal zone. It's an incredibly slow world where you have to learn to properly conserve your energy. But believe it or not, even here isn't the deepest part of the ocean, because in some places the sea floor doesn't flatten out at all. In some places, it literally cracks open and massive trenches plunge miles deeper into the Earth's crust, creating environments that drop well beyond 20,000 feet. And that's where we enter the final layer of the ocean, the hadal zone. The deepest part of the ocean stretches from about 20,000 feet down to nearly 36,000 feet in trenches like the Mariana Trench, where pressure exceeds 16,000 psi and temperatures hover just above freezing. It's an incredibly small part of the sea floor, but makes up a huge portion of the ocean's total depth. And despite how extreme it is, life still survives here through specialized adaptations, with many species found nowhere else on Earth. And even though pressure should make survival nearly impossible for fish, one of the most extraordinary animals on the planet lives down here, the Mariana snailfish. This pale, ghost-like little fish was first discovered during deep-sea expeditions exploring the infamous Mariana Trench, and it holds the record as the deepest living fish ever captured on the seafloor. Some individuals have been recorded at depths of nearly 26,000 feet, which is just nuts when you think about it. At those depths, the pressure is so extreme that the bones of most animals would simply collapse. But the snailfish has evolved a body perfectly situated to the hadal trenches, where instead of the usual bones that fish have, its body is soft and almost gelatinous, with thin muscles and incomplete bone structures that allow it to withstand the immense pressure. Its skin is pale and almost translucent, and its vision appears to be extremely limited, because down here, sight is pretty much useless anyway. Instead, these fish drift slowly along the sea floor, feeding on tiny crustaceans and other small invertebrates that live in the sediment. And surprisingly, in some parts of the trench, they may actually be the top predator of the entire ecosystem, mainly because no other animals can survive in that part of the ocean. And that really puts the hadal zone into perspective, since this is an environment so extreme that even the animals capable of living here are pushed to the absolute biological limits of life. Or are they? Because occasionally, when deep-sea subs or remotely operated vehicles descend into these depths, their cameras capture something drifting through the darkness that looks almost impossible to explain. Long, ghostly arms hanging motionless in the water column, literally looking like limbs so long they seem to stretch endlessly into the black. This is the long-armed squid, aka bigfin squids. They belong to the mysterious genus Magnapinna, and they are among the most rarely seen animals in the entire ocean. In fact, scientists still know very little about them, because nearly all of our observations come from brief encounters with deep-sea cameras, and get this, all of their sightings have been recorded, and they've only ever been seen 55 times in history. The last time one of these was seen was in October 2025 off of the Cook Islands at 16,994 feet. And what makes these squids so bizarre is the way they hold their arms and tentacles. They bend their limbs at the sharp angles, forming almost elbow-like joints. And from those elbows, their arms extend downward in incredibly long filaments that can reach up to several feet in length, sometimes up to 20 times the length of the squid's body. But the most surprising thing is that nobody is entirely sure how they feed. Some scientists believe they drag those long arms along the seafloor to capture prey, while others think they simply wait for small animals to bump into them. Either way, seeing one of these squid on camera is enough to make it feel like you're watching something from out of space. And what's even more incredible is that these squid have now been recorded at depths of over 20,000 feet, making them the deepest living squid ever observed, and one of the very few cephalopods known to enter the Hadal Zone. Hey, I hope you guys like learning about some of these crazy deep sea creatures. Make sure you subscribe if you'd like to learn more about really cool animals. See you on the next video.